when I started in the last book, I called it non-reactive empathy. But I've heard it called functional empathy, and I've come to call it compassionate and courageous empathy. That when people give us, their stories and what they feel about it, that we can fully take in and understand their stories. Empathy just means understanding. It doesn't mean feeling with. That I can, through my experience, fully understand how you see the situation and why you feel this way. But I don't get attached to your emotions. So I understand it, and then I release it and stay present. And I certainly don't jump in to fix you. That's the worst thing I can do, because then I make you weak. I just fully engage. And if people are intense in their emotion, just allow them to have the emotion. All emotions have an arc. There's the trigger, there's the intensity, and then it starts to diminish. And in the moment that their emotional energy starts to wane, that you can then say, so tell me what's going on with you. What do you see? And then they tell you. You could say, you got really quiet there. I couldn't tell. It felt as if you were sad. And I said that once to a leader, and he said, no, I'm not sad. I'm embarrassed for what I've done, for what I've done in the past that wasn't really helpful. I said, okay, so how is that going to change your leadership? I cannot stay in that place where I can explore with them what their emotions meant. If I, sympathize and take on their emotion and their story, I take it in, I understand it, and I release the emotional energy so I can stay compassionate and curious.
Compassionate and curious, yeah.
Compassionate and curious empathy, yeah.
Share with us the wisdom of how we could be happy and enjoy happiness, please.
Yeah. Oh boy, luck has so much to do with happiness. Who you're married to, how much funds you have available. Who are the people in your life, and what do they do for you and with you? There are so many people who have such disadvantages in life. Homeless people, people with mental health problems, people who, for one reason or another, don't have a social support system that they can use when things get rough. I've been so lucky to have not had those sorry experiences that would certainly make one unhappy. It's also the fact that happiness versus unhappiness, is a hereditary, a genetic part of our genes. I mean, the fact is that many people suffer from severe depression because of their genetic makeup. And there aren't lots of things they can do about that. You can't make yourself different that way. So, I mean, I don't have advice. I mean, I did give you one piece of advice, and that was for academics. When you have a sabbatical, go away and stay away for as long as you can. That's certainly helpful. I mean, being in another culture for an extended period of time, like a year. That's certainly helpful. What else? It's all the things that could go wrong that didn't,
And it would be very happy for Vivian and I if we can see you and your wife in person.
I was very fortunate that I had built a relationship with a woman by the name of Barbara Barrett. And I had met Barbara during my first month or so at the White House. She was interviewing for a job to be Deputy Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. That's basically the U.S. government role that controls how the airplanes fly in and out of airports. And so Barbara ended up getting that job, and she would always tell me about her husband, whose name was Craig Barrett. And I was doing my master's thesis at that time while I was working at the White House. I was going to graduate school at nighttime, and my master's thesis was on how the Chinese might utilize what we call dual-use technologies with civilian use and military use, semiconductors and supercomputers. This was 1987, so I was a little ahead of my time. And I just told Barbara, I said, I'd love to meet your husband, because at that point in time, I knew that I wanted to leave Washington. The opportunity I pursued with naval intelligence wasn't going to work out, and I wanted to leave D.C. And so she arranged for me to meet Craig, and at that moment, he was the senior vice president of Intel Corporation, and Intel was only $1 billion company at that time. And as you may know, because it's close to Vietnam, that Intel in the late 80s was manufacturing in two places. They were manufacturing in Israel and in Malaysia, and then they also had their sites in the United States in Arizona and New Mexico. And so Craig hired me, and that's really was my opportunity. After Reagan left office, I went to work for Intel Corporation as Craig's troubleshooter, working on different projects that were of interest to him, some still in the national security space. I had an opportunity to study Chinese in Taiwan, so I moved to Taiwan for 6 months and studied Chinese. And then I moved with Craig when he was named heir apparent, which meant that he was going to be the CEO and chairman of the board of Intel. And at that point, I had the opportunity to continue to work at Intel. The other thing, though, that I did is that Barbara was very kind in nominating me to boards that she had served on. So at that same moment, around 1990, she had gone off a board that was dealing with the military, the one I referenced before, looking at the oversight of women's integration into the military. And so she nominated me for that board. So I was able to serve on that board while at the same time working full-time at Intel.
Wow. So, General Duke, how have you been improved your ability to think over the years?
I think with more knowledge that you get, and the older you get more maturity, and you can analyze situations more rationally than now I can see that that happens to me in my life as I've gotten maturity and more experience, and I can relate these experiences to my present experience and apply the lessons that I've tried to learn in the past. And I think life is a building block of experience and relationships, and I found now that since I've become a Christian and a follower of Jesus, I pray more about, Lord, what should I do? And where should I go? And how should we operate in our life, in our relationships? And I've never heard the voice of God in my ears, but I had these impressions in my heart. So it's like God's Spirit speaking to our spirit in our heart. It says, go this way. You have a an inclination that you ought to do this. And when sometimes I miss it, but most of the time it works out. So and Dottie and I, we pray a lot about decisions and what we should do and where we should go and what we should say, and it's all of these things that that make us one, if you will, with God. And so it's been an exciting journey for the last 40 years or so. So.
I remember a friend of my mother's bought me a motivational poster for my bedroom when I was maybe 8 or 10. And it was this phrase, it was just a picture of a dog, a husky dog. You know, the dogs that pull a sled across snow. It was a picture of their bum, their ass. And it was from behind. And it said, if you're not the lead dog, your view will never change. So this idea that, you know, if you're like the second or third dog, you spent your whole life looking at the asshole of the dog in front of you. You know, that's your view for your whole life. And I remember I used to have that poster up at my desk, and all the time I was studying as a kid, I guess it kind of went into me about like, wow, you know, like if you want to succeed, it's really up to you. Like you're the only person that has that. I mean, some people are lucky, of course, and you might succeed out of luck, but really it takes work, you know. And so I was always interested in business as a child. Not so much about the money, and still that's true today. It's not really about making money. So some entrepreneurs do it because they want to be successful, because they view success as wealth. They want the money to have the house, the car, you know. To me, it was never really about the money. My mother tells a story of when I was 3, I stole all of her magazines, all her women's magazines from her bedroom. I put them into my little tractor, my little plastic tractor, and I cycled to all the houses next door, and I sold each magazine to the other mothers for 1 penny each. And my mother was curious to where all her magazines had gone. I thought it was so obvious. You know, she had read the magazines, they were finished, so surely I could sell them to the other mothers and make money. And then I bought a bar of chocolate with the money, and that was like that was my first experience of, I don't remember this, but this was my first experience of you could do something, have an idea, execute the idea, and then have a benefit. The chocolate bar, like, wow. So I spent my entire life when I was 6, 8, 10 running small businesses. And it was never really about the money. It was about this idea, again, you know, where I grew up was the countryside, and it was like a 30-minute walk to the nearest shop. So I would walk with a friend down the fields, buy some chocolate or ice creams, come back, and then sell those to the children in the houses around me, and I would sell them for more than I bought them for. You know, this idea, and I was thought, I'm fooling them. They don't know that it's only like 10 cents in the shop, but I'm selling it for 12 cents. and so, you know, and then with the profits, and you would do all this work all day, walking miles and miles, and you would only make, you know, 10 cents. And then you would go back to the shop with the 10 cents and buy a chocolate bar, and you would have a free chocolate bar. I thought this was amazing. This thing I had discovered, that you could work, make money, and then with the money have a benefit. And so I spent my whole teenage years doing little businesses, cutting grass. I was a DJ. I was always looking for something to do, and it wasn't really about the money. It was just about the idea that you could make a business from nothing. You could just one day wake up and decide, I am going to start a teenage landscaping business. I'm going to cut grass every weekend, or I'm going to be a DJ, and just start buying records and be a DJ. And there was nothing stopping you.
Yeah. You know, it's such a great question, because like I remember when I first left Wall Street, my manager said, "You're going to regret this. Like, you are out of your mind." And I think that the way I think about it is that when you disrupt yourself, you're you're doing it because whenever you have a job, let's talk about it in the context of a job, it's doing a functional job and it's doing an emotional job. So functional job, I'm making money, food on the table, I've got a title, I've got a company that I get to associated with that brand. But the emotional job was not getting done. And the emotional job for me was, I feel like there's more for me to do on this planet.
Wow.
I can't do it here. So I can stay here, but for me, and I think this is, the pain started to be too high of staying where I was. Because if you're not growing, you're dying. I was grounded in this idea of disruption. So I understood the concept of like, you step back to slingshot forward. So I had this mental model or map that could help me navigate it. Now, to be clear, I didn't do this as neatly as I possibly could have. And I'm sure my husband was like, what are you doing? But he loves me, so it turned out okay. But I think when you do make that decision to disrupt yourself, you leave a job, you decide you're going to go out and write a book, it's because the emotional job or need that you have can't get done where you are, and it becomes too painful for you to stay. And you realize, if I don't do this, I am going to start dying inside just a little bit, so I have to disrupt myself. And so my advice would be, for people who you said are interviewing and they're like, they're not changing, is to employ the loss aversion theory, which is Daniel Kahneman. And the loss aversion theory is, we're more motivated by what we lose than by what we gain.
Yeah.
So the way that you can use it there is, you ask yourself the question, not what amazing things will happen if I disrupt myself and go do something new. What bad thing will happen to me if I stay here?
Before I answer that question, there is one important thing to say.
Yes.
The only person who is in charge of your life and who can make decisions for you, most of the time, if we talk about societies that have that luxury, is you, right?
Yes.
So if you say like, oh, I can't focus on books, I get distracted, well, that is your choice. You've made this decision, right? Sure, you can be addicted to something, so that is a chemically based decision. And we need to address that. Or maybe it is your desire, so we need to address that. Maybe you have a long-term goal, but you always give preference to short-term things, to short-term needs, and you always satisfy them first. And then you're like, oh, I can't move forward in my life. Well, what do you pay attention to grows, right? And if you pay attention to things that do not propel you forward, well, you're not going to be moving forward. And then we have a tendency, and we kind of go back into fixed and growth mindset, we have a tendency to blame it on other people, or blame it on the system, or blame it on the universe, blame it on the God, whoever, right? But not us. Oh, we tried, but someone else, And this is the first issue. So take responsibility that you are responsible for your life, number one. And then the second thing, what is the best tool? Well, best is maybe too strong a word, but a very useful tool to have is something we call a personal vision.
Personal vision.
And that is, personal vision. Like, you probably heard of it a million times, but it is a useful thing to have it almost, I would say, written down. It's like, who am I? Not in 5 or 10 years, but who am I in life? Like, who do I want to be? And how is that person defined? And what skills or feelings or observed behaviors define that person? If I look at me and I achieve that, what's different? Right? Where am I going with this, and why? And this is the crucial question. Simon Sinek always says that. Ask the why, right? So why do I want to be that person? What is the motivation to get there? Is my motivation money? Is my motivation greed? Is my motivation power? Is my motivation help? Is my motivation growth? None of that is wrong or bad or good. I don't care about those labels, but it's good to start with, like, who do I want to be and why? What are the steps I need to take to get there? Who can help me on the way? Right? So, and again, what you focus on grows. So focus on being surrounded by people with whom you can have mutually beneficial relationships. So people who will support you, people who will always tell you what they think if you ask them for it. People who are willing to help you out, people who are willing to share and knowledge, but also people who expect from you the same, right? So surround yourself with people like that. Get rid of the freeloaders. Get rid of the people who project envy, who project anger, who project manipulation, because those people will not enrich you in life. They will only take you down. They will only take you down with them. So surround yourself with the right network.
Beautiful.
Focus on your internal world. That means what's going on inside here. Seek out therapy. Seek out mindset tools. Seek out people who can help you with that in that area as well. Focus on mental resilience. If meditation is your thing, go for meditation or go for calming of your brain. Become more mindful. These would be all the things connected. But I would start with the personal vision. All of the other things are tools, right? But why do you want to be the person you want to be? And what if it happens, right? So then what?
Wow. Wow.
You mean what should we do to encourage curiosity?
You know, not to encourage curiosity, but what we stop doing so that we can grow curiosity.
Well, so yes, you know, to be honest, scientists don't yet fully know all the reasons why curiosity seems to diminish a bit as kids get older. So every parent who listens to your show knows what it's like to have an 18-month-old. They're curious about everything all the time. They put it in their mouth, they rattle on it, they open it, they ask a million trillion questions, and that diminishes over time. Partly that's because as we get older, we get more familiar with the world around us, so we don't have to ask as many questions about it. And also there are other things that take its place, like knowing, not asking questions, but sharing what you already know. So some of that is inevitable. But I would say that one reason curiosity diminishes is because we give kids less permission to ask questions. It's just, so my research shows that when kids get to school, they ask far fewer questions, and they have far fewer opportunities to get answers to those questions, or ask a second question, or they don't get help answering their questions. Like, you know, you could have a kid in school say, why does, you know, I'm trying to think of a good example. Why does butter get hard in some circumstances and melt into a liquid in others? I don't know why I thought of that. That's just because it was breakfast recently here. But breakfast time. But any number of questions. Why is there global warming? Might be a question. And then instead of saying we don't have time for that question, or that's not the topic we're studying now, answer the question. Or help your student figure out what they would need to do to get an answer. Because encouraging that curiosity is about the best educational skill you can give them.
I know.
And it doesn't, you need teachers. You don't just need wild freedom to pursue that. You need help learning how to make your questions better, how to get the right kind of answers that really will answer your question, the right kind of data, and knowing how to assess when your question's been answered. So there's a huge role for teachers and schools to play in that process, but the one thing that schools mostly do is the worst thing, which is to discourage question asking.
I know.
I have to go back to this thing. There's two things. One is this driving curiosity. I mean, it's why I end up starting research projects now, when most people would say, hell, you should have been retired 10 years ago. What are you doing starting new research projects? Because it always takes 3 to 5 years to do a research project, and then a few years to get it published. But I'm still curious about certain things. And the other is this belief that we can make our lives and the lives of others around us better.
Beautiful.
I think, you know, when you stop and look at how little change occurs in a desired direction, and it's amazingly poor results when you actually study that, and you think about all of the things that we as humans do to damage ourselves, you know, like smoking cigarettes or gaining weight or fixating on negative thoughts, or we do to other people. Again, it could be unintentionally, or we could be angry.
Mm.
The things we do to the planet, the things we do to the plants and things around us. It's amazing that we're still here. And not only are we still here, but if you actually study, and this varies by culture, but if you actually study, are people's lives better today than 40 years ago or 30 years ago? The answer is almost completely yes, in terms of square footage of where they live, in terms of caloric intake and their access to food, in terms of healthcare. That's why in most social classes, in most countries and cultures of the world, people are living longer. I mean, we haven't eliminated the germs. What we've done is found ways to battle them. So you look at all these things, and by all of these measures, and this, you know, I mean, you and I are, what, 8,000 miles apart right now? Something like that? And we're having this conversation about ideas of mutual interest. We've never met. And yet, you know, I'm enjoying your questions. I don't know if, I hope you're enjoying my answers, but
I do.
But we're having a conversation that seems to be of interest to both of us. That wasn't possible even 40 years ago. I mean, a smartphone started in 2007. The internet didn't become accessible to most of us till somewhere in the late 90s. You know, and you stop and say, okay, well, back in those days, it was the telephone or the newspaper or the radio. A little bit of the TV, but that was slower. And you stop and say, oh my God, you know, I mean, so I look at all of that and I say, yes, there are a lot of things that are wrong that we have to work on and fix. But we're still here.
We're still here.
And we're still here and doing better than ever before, not for every person, but for more of us than ever before. A higher percentage of the population of the earth does not live under horrendous life-threatening conditions as they did 100 years ago or 200 years ago.
True.
So you put all that together, and why? It's because as humans, we're very innovative and adaptive.
Beautiful.
And if my work can help people do that, can help people make that a little bit better, faster, more compassionate, then yes, that's what I'm going to keep working on.
Beautiful.
Time isn't usually one of the factors that you're using to evaluate, you know, how well is that going?
Yeah.
And so how I was being measured was in direct contrast to one of my values, which was create a relationship that's meaningful and helps this person in some way, as opposed to just, oh, I'm supposed to be off the phone in 34 seconds, you know. So there were a lot of things that I learned in that first role in corporate that I learned didn't work well for me. And as I saw throughout my career, I saw that those were things that weren't working well for other people too.
Yeah.
But they weren't asking questions. You know, they were just saying, okay, well, if this is status quo and this is what it is, then I'll settle and I'll do this. And in my world, I kept thinking, there has to be something more. Like, there must be something more. There has to be something that is bigger than this, that contributes more to the world, that makes a difference and that matters. And so I set out to really understand what was that, and how could I help other people find that too.
Beautiful. Because a lot of people also read books, and a lot of books also somewhat ignite the interest inside of them, but they couldn't make it happen to become, a career or something for them. So tell us how you feel exactly when you read those two books that you say, okay, it's ignite the dreams inside of you out.
Yeah, I think that when you think about the causes and conditions that allow certain things to manifest, for me, what happened was there was this natural energy that I recognized. I could feel it, I could feel it in my body, how I felt and how energized. I could feel the energy coursing through me whenever I would be exposed to these topics of, let's talk about psychology or let's talk about business problems. And so because I could feel it in my body, I knew that there was a natural energy, something bigger than myself, that was flowing through me. So I started to honor that energy, follow that energy, and that's something I try to do to this very day.
So respond to those energies and trying to find the answer.
Well, you're talking about just a relationship, not marriage, just...
I mean marriage, yes.
Marriage, okay, marriage. Okay, yes, once you're married, to know that God hates divorce. And so he gives condition for divorce if there's adultery that happens. Otherwise, he wants people to stay together. Of course, I would think, if you're beat up and abused, there's certainly that situation too. But the Lord can heal it. He can heal it. I felt like we were totally different people. We should never have been married. That I was a very certain person this way, and he was a certain person that way, and it was just opposites. And somehow opposite seems to attract. And I think it helps to mold us a little bit better, so we get a little bit more in the middle. But just forgiveness really is a very, very important thing. To forgive when you're going to hurt each other, you're going to have times that are bad. To forgive and then commit yourself to love, and to realize that Jesus is the one that will be the perfect one. Jesus is the one that will love you all the time, no matter what. He'll love you. He'll forgive you. Your husband might not forgive you, but he will. The Lord will. And so just if your husband doesn't know the Lord and you do what the Lord wants you to do.
Wow.
And follow that. You don't have to try to shake them up and do anything like that. You just love them and let God take care of them. But you do what God wants you to do. And the first thing you need to do is turn your life over to the Lord and just say that you believe that Jesus did die for you on the cross. He is God incarnate, and he's with the Father in heaven. How to explain the Trinity, nobody's been able to really explain that well. Yeah. I've heard it said with water can be ice, water can be steam, and water can be physical. So yeah, it could be, you could look at it like that. But anyway, there are three parts to the one God.
Wow.
It's one God. but turn your life over. But it has to be through Jesus.
Yeah.
And the Bible is very clear saying that there's no other name by which you can be saved. Only way to God is through Jesus. He's the way, the truth, the life. And so that's the only way. It has to be Jesus. And the Lord made that very clear to me. I had some sects come and visit me after that, and the Lord said, no, on the Bible, Jesus, that's who the one is that you're following, and that's who you stay with. And because there can be sects that are wrong. And by sects, I mean people that don't believe Jesus is God. That's really the criteria. Because there's certain people that might call themselves Christians, like Mormons. They don't believe, they believe Jesus is a God, not the God.
Yeah. Wow.
So there's a difference there. So just turn your life over to him and just walk with him as close as you can.
Wow, I must say, it brings back a lot of pleasant memories. So thank you for bringing me back in time and asking really good questions. So what did I experience? I experienced what it was like to discover things about myself. And that there's a lecture that I do with the final course in the sequence of graduate classes in our master's degree program in creativity and change leadership. In the seminar on creativity and change leadership, we talk about power. And we discuss personal power because leadership is about how you influence others. It's not about your title. You know, you can have someone who has the title of boss, but they're a terrible leader because they're not positively influencing others. You can have someone who has the title of manager, but that's not necessarily being a leader. It's what you do. It's how you influence others. And so in this lecture, I talk to my students about how we can lose our power, how we give up our power by negative self-talk, for example, or by credentializing, believing that we don't have the right credentials to be able to do something. So to tie that back to your question, what was it when I was 18, 19 years old? What was it about this creativity course? It connected me to the power inside of myself, that I had the power to solve my own problems. I had the power to make choices and to create alternatives in my life. I mean, very simple creativity principle. When you're faced with a problem, you don't go with your first answer. Your first answer may not be the best direction to go in. Always ask yourself, what else might I do? What else might I do? What are my alternatives? And that was a powerful insight for me. You know, sometimes we go through life just sort of reacting rather than being proactive. And I guess one of the things that I realized at the age of 18 or 19 was to truly be awake and understand that I could navigate and direct my own life. And I had choices and I could create alternatives for myself. And that's very powerful. So I would say, you know, what made me commit to, or what was it that made that first course in creativity so powerful for me, was that it connected me to the power inside of myself.
Were you actively seeking for that, you know, that tool before that day that you joined the class?
No, are you kidding? I had never even heard of creativity. I didn't even know it was a thing. I thought, like many people, that creativity was for artists. I didn't think of it as a thought process or a skill set or something that I could develop. And you know, honestly, now it has impacted every aspect of my life, including parenting and raising my children. You know, when you have children and, you know, nothing prepares you for being a parent, really. It's on-the-job training, right? You're learning as you're going. But I will say my skills in solving problems creatively and my skills as a facilitator helped me to be a parent. I'll share a story with you because I know your listeners like stories. So I have two boys, Gabriel and Anthony, and I remember we were having dinner one time. Gabriel was probably like 10, 11 years old, so his brother was probably like 7 or 8. And he says to me, while we're having dinner, he announces, get this, he says to me, you know, Dad, he's very thoughtful. He's got a big brain. He's a very thoughtful person, very soulful. He says to me, you know what, Dad? I've been thinking, you're not like other fathers. Well, what do you mean I'm not like other fathers? And he said, well, that you just asked me a question. You ask lots of questions. I don't see other fathers doing that. I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is interesting. So, Gabe, tell me, how else am I not like other fathers? And he said, well, you know, when I'm fighting with my brother Anthony, you'll say things like, how else might you solve this problem? And I have to say, it blew me away, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm using creative facilitation with my children. I didn't even know it. So that's a strategy, questioning strategy, turning a challenge, into an open-ended question to explore other ways. Okay, so yes, you could fight each other, but what else might you do? How else might you solve this problem is a creative question. I didn't even know I was doing that as a parent. And here you have a 10, 11-year-old reflecting that back to me. I share that story with you because it highlighted for me, and I didn't realize this, it was like looking in the mirror. I didn't realize how much of my training I was adopting into my parenting. So I share that story just to highlight the universal application of creativity and creative problem solving and facilitation skills across all aspects of our lives, not just our work lives, but our personal lives as well.
I cannot tell you how important it is for you in any conversation to fully understand what does this person want that they don't have now. So when people come to us in coaching, and even employees to their leaders, and they have a problem, they have a challenge, and we're not there to solve their problem and their challenge. We're there to open their awareness as to what they may do next. I've recognized most people, they know what to do, they're just afraid to do it. I don't have to say what you should do, or what have you thought about it. I want to hear your story first. So tell me how you see the situation that's making it a challenge for you. And then I listen to their story. And within the story, there's key words and phrases and repeated things that are most important to them. And the words after but. Yeah, I really want to connect with my team better, but they're so upset about what's happening in the company, I can't. So it's the but that demonstrates the fear. It's the should that demonstrates the conflict. Mm-hmm. So I listen to their story and I share back what I'm hearing. And I could be wrong, but the sharing back helps people to feel seen, heard, and valued. And they'll go deeper with you when they feel seen, heard, and valued. So do not jump in and tell them what to do. Help them feel seen, heard, and valued. And eventually they'll tell you what it is they want, and then you catch that. And I hear what you're saying, that you think it may not happen, but this is what you want. Is this what you want to work on to create or change? And then I have to see the picture of what you want, and never assume I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So if you say I want better relationships, what do you mean by better relationships? What does it look like? What would you like as an outcome? And who would you be if you were in that moment and you had a good relationship? I need to understand those things first. So I have a tool on what are some of the things you would ask and how you can get into helping them feel seen and defining what they really, 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 really want, which they don't even know how to articulate. They know how to tell you the problem, but they don't know what they want instead. So don't ask them, what do you want out of our time? You have to pull it out of their story. So the tool is on how do you pull out of their story and then confirm with them, this is what they want. And often they'll say, that's not it, it's something else. Great, then we go deeper. So that's the second tool. Wow. Really getting to the true desired outcome.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, that will be it. They'll have the awareness that solves their problem when you get to what they really want to create.
Well, gosh, that's a great question, and I think these are questions for the world, not just Derek. These are questions for everybody listening in should be answering this question in their own definition. And I think that's what this is all about. But in my particular case, I think I'd like to think that I've always had the mindset that if I can learn something, I can take that something and share it. And just like planting trees, if I can plant that tree, I know that's going to grow into something beautiful and go from there. And if I can take an idea and do the same thing and plant it with another person. So I've always kind of trained my brain and my mind to just absorb. And it's not just reading a book. It's not just having a conversation with a philosopher or a doctor or a lawyer. It's about noticing everything in between. And to me, the study of life is everything in between. So when I look to the left over at that beautiful tree in my yard, and then I look over here at that beautiful mountain, I know both items exist. But what's important to me is how much I missed in between. Looking from the tree to the mountain, there's so much here in front of me between looking at the tree and the mountain that I'm teaching myself to recognize every situational and item in that transfer of vision over to the next view. So it's almost like I'm scanning as I go. And so instead of the tree and the mountain being the items of importance or what I'm acknowledging or what have you, I'm trying to pay attention to, after the tree there was a homeless guy sitting on the corner that needed $1. And after the homeless man there was a sign on the store that said closed for business. Then I want to recognize all the moments and things in between that next item, so I absorb and retain everything I need to make my next move. And I try to do that in the most positive shape to where I can share it with another person or in some light that it's like, planting a tree, planting an idea. And I like to take that stuff in between. And I'm learning this.
Yeah.
So recognizing all that information in between, I think is important.
Beautiful.
And that's what I'm trying to do a little better.
Beautiful.
In my job as head of R&D, and I come up through product development, that was all about designing and writing workshops. So, and these were not, people often think, a corporate workshop, that means you did some PowerPoint slides. No, this was like we did serious research, and then we created these very well-designed learning experiences that included, instructor materials and participant materials. And so I was kind of writing books in a way, all the way along. But Forum also had a tradition of putting out books. So the executives often would, like any consulting firm, they always like you to have a book, or they like to publish books. So when I joined the leadership team as Executive Vice President R&D, I realized that I was now in a position to be the author of the next book, of the company's next book. There wasn't anybody in a better position, because as the head of research and development, it would naturally be me. So again, being sort of an opportunist, I thought, I've always wanted to write a book, and by gosh, I'm going to do it. So I had the resources, I had the authority, I had the idea to Strategic Speed, which is about, the subtitle is Mobilize People, Accelerate Execution. So Strategic Speed is all about how do you really accelerate execution in organizations. And surprise, it turns out it's all about the people, right? It's not about the technology, it's not about the process improvement, it's about the people. So we launched a research project on that, and I knew I could write, and I wanted to write. So we hired a ghostwriter to help our team, because I didn't have a lot of time to write a book. So we hired somebody to sort of move the process along. And that worked out well. But again, it was collaborative. We had a team with researchers and this ghostwriter and me, and then our CEO also was helping as well. So yeah, it was a great experience, and it was the result of me as the little girl saying, one day I'm going to write a book. And so I did.
Let's travel back into that little girl, Jocelyn. When that little girl wanted to write a book, right? What ideas or what kind of book did you think that she's gonna write about? Any ideas?
Yeah, no, I did not think I was going to write Strategic Speed.
So how did you motivate yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. Like I've always had a really good work ethic. As a lawyer, I'm used to putting in the hours, and so putting in the hours and being disciplined, that wasn't anything new for me. That's something that I've done my whole career, and that's the kind of that Asians, Indians, we're all kind of raised in that mentality, that mindset. My parents are always like, work hard, keep your head down, work hard, and you'll get successful. So I already had that mindset. But when I was dealing with not seeing results right away, whenever I would start to feel frustrated, or I feel like, okay, this isn't happening, maybe this isn't for me. Again, it's all about the people you support yourself with. I had some good friends that I can turn to ask for advice. I had some good mentors that I can say, what should I be doing? I grew my business very organically. So I didn't pay anybody to market my services. I didn't hire anybody. I did everything myself. And so a lot of it was learning. And so whenever I would hit those points where I'm like, it's not happening quick enough, I would ask myself the question, well, what can I do to make it happen quicker, right? And so I was always looking to learn so that I can evolve, and leveraging technology, is like, how do I use the pandemic? When prior to the pandemic, I never even used Zoom before, right? And so we got Zoom. And so that really took my business to a whole nother level, because now I do trainings for clients in India and South Africa. I've got clients all over, and I could do that from home, right? So constantly evolving and growing. And the other part of what I did was a lot of self-care, right? So I realized, early on that this wasn't going to be an easy road. And I've seen my parents and a lot of my family members have also had their own businesses struggle with health, and with not taking good care of themselves. So taking care of myself from a physical perspective, from a mental perspective, also from a spiritual perspective, is something that's always been important to me. And it became even more important during the pandemic, right? That's where I realized, like, I need to go into my own bubble, and I need to do this even more. So I started doing group meditations and so forth. So for everybody that's listening or watching this, that's one thing I have to stress enough is you can't pour from an empty cup, right? You have to take care of yourself and fill up your own cup before you can fill up everybody else's and help other people.
Beautiful. And thank you for reminding that.
Absolutely. After serving the Air Force, you know, culminating after 29 years, but I knew it was time to transition. I loved working on Capitol Hill, and I really did not want to go back to being a program manager. Although I loved it, it was exciting. I knew that it was time to end that chapter and start the next. And so I was letting everyone know. So this is great for your audience too. It's always about networking, letting people know what you need, you know, building that network throughout your career so that people can help you. So I was letting people know I'm going to retire from the Air Force. Please keep me in mind if you hear of opportunities. And one day, the Chief Operating Officer job position came across my desk because somebody sent it to me and said, hey, in case you know anybody. Well, I did know somebody, me. But once again, I wasn't sure that was for me because what is a Chief Operating Officer, right? I'd been in the Air Force 29 years. What's a Chief Operating Officer? And in my mind, I had these blinders kind of on. I was a program manager, or I worked on Capitol Hill, so that makes you government affairs or legislative liaison. And COO wasn't really in the picture. So I kind of looked at it and I said, I wonder if I should apply for this job to be this Chief Operating Officer at Space Foundation. And fortunately, one of my friends I work with, I talked out loud. She said, you should never disqualify yourself from something you haven't been offered. And so I share with you and your audience, how many times has something come across an opportunity, and because you weren't sure it was right for you, you disqualified yourself from it. You weren't even offered the job, but you just took yourself even out of the race. You didn't even start the race. You just decided, I'm not even going to run the race because I can't win the race. So I share with you and your audience, take those blinders off. Be open to new experiences. Maybe it doesn't look like what you think it should. Maybe it's not exactly what you thought you should do, but give it a try. Don't ever disqualify yourself from something you haven't been offered.
Wow.
Well, you know, you mentioned your daughter studying psychology.
Yes.
I'm a big supporter and proponent of therapy, and that helps open your mind. Along the way, and that's part of the book too, that once you hit 9 years old, your soul gets chipped from the world. The reality hits in, it becomes harder to become pure. Until 9 years old, you're very, very mostly pure soul. And so as we get older, we get chipped away. And then it clouds our vision. It's like a car going, an older car, the headlights get so fogged up from being so old and so long and not clean. Therapy will clean all that stuff out in you, give you a lot more clarity. We'll get rid of the things that are holding you back. And the highest level of that would be psychoanalysis, where you go very, very deep into your mind, and you just get a lot of clarity. And once you get clarity, it really is the difference between a cloudy sky and a perfectly blue sky. You can see things you couldn't see before that were holding you back. Some of us are sadly are so at that point damaged or chipped or whatever that they become addicts or alcoholics. I'm not even talking about them. I'm talking about each one of us as individuals can benefit from opening ourselves up through clarity, through therapy, from a licensed professional who's able to get in there. Not your friend, not your wife, but a licensed professional that can really clear out your mind so that you can be even more successful and do what you want to do.
Beautiful.
Oh boy, that would be a great article to write. That's kind of my way of thinking, of saying that would be a good one to think really deeply about. I love that. Yeah, how do we get more curious? I think we give ourselves permission to explore, right? Like sometimes we don't take the time. Like, I don't know, we're having a conversation with somebody at dinner and we get curious about, I don't know, some aspect of history, and we Google it and find the answer and then we're done. I think if we give ourselves permission to explore more deeply, that's a really good thing. I think we can give ourselves permission to explore broadly. Like, you know, I might be
fundamentally interested in, I don't know, horticulture, but I can explore more deeply in more elements of nature and biology and ecology potentially. So explore broadly. I think we can also give ourselves permission, right? I think another thing we can do to enhance our curiosity is to expand our networks. Like our algorithms work too well. Like we tend to be exposed to information that we already agree with, that tends to match up with what we've looked at in the past, right? And better for us would be to expose ourselves to more different points of view, even if they digress from our belief system, right? Like when we expose ourselves to lots of different kinds of thinking, that helps us to expand our perspectives and helps to make us more curious and more empathetic. So when we can invite in a different opinion, when we can invite in a different person, when we can invite a conversation with somebody who maybe will debate with us and help us to really expand and enhance our own thinking, I think that's a really good thing. Like, sometimes we don't always want to agree with the people around us. We want to furrow our brow and scratch our heads and say, hey, wait a minute, tell me more about that, right? So I think those are things that can help us be more curious.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. That's something I hear quite often too. And I think there's a few reasons. I think sometimes we see people tell stories and they make it look so easy. Maybe it's a keynote speaker or maybe a TED speaker or someone that they just make it look easy. And what you don't see is all the preparation that went into their stories. This is a skill that can be learned. I find most often when people struggle, there's two big reasons. The first is that they aren't sure what story to tell and they're just picking any story that they've heard. And really, stories start with your audience. Because whenever you're telling a story, there's something that you want your listener to know, think, feel, or do. And you want to get clear on that, even if you know the story that you're going to tell. And when you get clear on that, it makes it so much easier to connect what you're saying to the person listening. The second is that it's not enough to tell a story. The way you tell one does make a difference in the experience. And so having a basic structure for the story makes it not only easier for you to tell a story that doesn't ramble, but it makes it easier for the listener to follow. And so there's specific things like this that once you see steps that break down what to do, you're going to recognize that you are a storyteller. You are probably already telling stories with family and friends, and this is no different. You can take this and apply it in different settings because we naturally do this.